I woke that morning with the usual weight of quiet pressing gently against my chest. 70 years of life folded around me like the soft but worn shawl draped over my shoulders. The house was still. The heavy silence that had settled over these rooms during the years since my husband passed felt almost tangible. Outside, the morning light sifted weakly through pale curtains, reaching only to timidly illuminate the faded photographs that lined the mantel. Each picture held a snapshot of a past teeming with laughter and hope, of children once small and carefree, of family moments that seemed more like fragile relics now. The photographs were dusty, rarely touched, yet they held a lifetime's worth of memories, a lifetime I had always believed to be shared and cherished, but now I understood how solely they belonged to me. The table was spread simply, a cup of tea cooling beside a plate left untouched as I sat, tracing the lines of age on my hands. The quiet was thick, weighted with anticipation and an ache I could hardly name. Today was my 70th birthday, a milestone, they said, a day to celebrate the life I had given, the sacrifices quietly made, though no one had spoken of those sacrifices for years. I told myself hope still flickered somewhere beneath the surface. Maybe this day would be different. Maybe my children would remember who I was beyond the label of mother. But as the clock ticked toward noon, the house seemed only to breathe beneath a silent menace. I heard the doorbell first as a faint jab, a note that set nerves alight. The guests began to arrive, Mark first, his tall frame filling the doorway, followed by Lisa, her carefully rehearsed smile like a mask hiding sharper truths. Vanessa came last, her laughter that did not quite reach her eyes, weaving through the room with a practiced ease that irked me. Their presence should have brought warmth, a moment to soften the hard edges of my solitude, but I felt none of that. Instead, the air between us crackled, emptied of the usual tenderness that once bound us. Their greetings felt like hollow scripts recited to placate, the small talk littered with sighs and glances that avoided connection. Then, as the afternoon sun dipped lower, Mark took up a glass. His smile was too wide, a flash of triumph lurking just beneath the surface. Lisa leaned close, her grin razor-thin, sharp enough to slice through steel. The chatter quieted, and all eyes before me turned. His words came slow and deliberate, coated with a venom disguised as humor. They mocked me, my age, my memories, the quiet dignity I had tried to maintain. Their laughter grew hollow and cruel, an echo chamber of scorn that filled the room like a chilling wind. They called me a burden, joked about my limited mind in ways that bruised more than skin. They whispered of needing to hurry before the inheritance was finally given away, thinly veiled threats wrapped in laughter so cold they cut deeper than any harsh word. My heart clenched, a cold stone lodged in the hollow beneath my ribs. Every insult, every cutting remark was a blow forged from years of resentment I never fully fathomed until this moment. I sat still, the room blurring around me as waves of betrayal crashed relentless against the fragile shore of my hope. The laughter swelled and crashed like an unforgiving tide, drowning the mother who had dreamed of peace and recognition into a hollow shell. Eyes blurred with unshed tears, I realized the truth that had been quietly mauling at my spirit for years. They no longer saw me as their mother, only as an obstacle, a stepping stone toward their selfish desires. The warmth I craved never existed in their hearts. In that moment, the cold clarity of their contempt was undeniable. From beneath the weight of shattered illusions, a new vision emerged. I saw the vast and jagged gulf between us, a void not bridged by shed blood or faded love. It was a divide carved by greed, by unanswered debts of gratitude, by years of silent disregard that now screamed with unbearable volume. What I had once hoped to protect, the fragile thread of family, was severed. And yet, in the cruel chorus of mockery, something unexpected stirred within me. Not despair, but a clarity so sharp it cut through the pain. Love cannot thrive in soil poisoned by greed. I was no longer blind to the truth hidden behind the smiles, no longer blinded by the wheat of expectation or memory. I sat alone amidst the echo of their laughter, knowing finally that this day was not a celebration, but a reckoning. The mother they dismissed had not faded. She was watching, waiting, learning the contours of a new, silent resolve. The fragile house of our family was crumbling, but from its rubble, something silently unyielding began to rise. The laughter finally subsided, leaving behind the kind of silence that presses on the ears, heavy and full of unspoken things. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap, my breathing slow and steady. The room, which moments before had felt like a battlefield, transformed into a strange sanctuary where my thoughts began to gather, sharp and purposeful. Though my heart ached, an ember of something new, a quiet resolve, kindled deep inside me. In those hours that followed, the house seemed both cavernous and suffocating. I wandered from room to room, each one filled with memories, cluttered with both joy and pain. The worn-out couch where my children had once sprawled in laughter, the faded curtains they had pulled close during games of hide-and-seek, the well-used kitchen table around which countless meals were shared. All these spaces bore the imprint of a family that was no longer whole. I touched the surfaces lightly, feeling the ghosts of better days linger beneath the dust. But when I touched my own reflection in the hallway mirror, the woman staring back was unfamiliar. A woman who carried the weight of decades, but whose eyes had finally sharpened with clarity and purpose. The temptation to drown my hurt in anger was strong, but I resisted. Anger was a fire I had learned long ago to keep in check. It was raw and destructive, burning bridges I might later need to cross. No, this time I needed patience. I needed to be invisible until the right moment came. To survive, I would encase myself in quiet calculation. I pulled a worn leather-bound notebook from a hidden shelf, a journal I had kept sporadically over the years, chronicling my thoughts, pains, and little triumphs. Its pages were yellowed, but the words were clear. I flipped through entries about sleepless nights when my children were small, my hands fretting over scraped knees and broken dreams. Reminders of sacrifices made quietly, without complaint. Sacrifices masked under the smiles I offered despite exhaustion. Every sleepless night balancing bills, managing the household finances, navigating the endless demands that motherhood required. These memories searched for recognition, but found none from those who now jeered at my age and diminished my worth. The promises I had made silently over the years floated before me. Promises to support their hopes, to maintain this home as a beacon of refuge, to save and provide so that their futures would be secure. Yet today's betrayal was a stark condemnation of all those quiet efforts. It was as if every act of love had been erased with a cruel stroke. I thought of the house, our home, and the tangled roots it represented. Its walls held stories and secrets, but also the legacy of my life's work. It was a sanctuary built from love and sacrifice, but had been reduced in their eyes to little more than a prize to be seized. My heart clenched at the thought of them not valuing what it meant to me, what it signified. They saw only what they could inherit, never what I had lived through to create. Night fell, blanketing the world outside in darkness, while inside my mind worked in quiet turmoil. Alone with my thoughts, I resolved this. No longer would I be the passive witness to ambition masked as family love. I refused to let grief or anger govern my decisions. Instead, I would attack through silence and calculation, embodying the stoic patience that years of hardship had forged within me. I began to quietly make plans, not impulsive or loud, but deliberate. Slowly, I reviewed every detail of our shared history and my own affairs, gathering strength from my knowledge of legal and financial matters I had come to understand through necessity. How many times had I managed investments to provide for our future, negotiated complex documents to ensure security? This knowledge was my shield and my sword. I realize now it would be the foundation of my quiet retaliation. I considered every interaction since Mark and Lisa's cruelty unfolded. The whispered conversations, the sidelong glances of Vanessa. Their underestimation left glaring vulnerabilities. They believed they held all the power, that my age and solitude made me fragile. But what they failed to see was the patience of a woman who had learned to wait for the precise moment when silence and observation would become weapons of might. As dawn neared, thoughts of vengeance were no longer tinged with bitterness, but with clear purpose. I was no longer the woman they dismissed. I was a strategist in a long game they knew nothing about. What kind of justice would I seek? Not one of rancorous confrontations or loud accusations. No, I would craft a justice that unfolded quietly, imperceptibly. A justice that would reclaim what was rightfully mine, without shouting, without tears displayed in public. I imagined my house, our home, no longer their battleground, but my fortress. Every document, every bit of control I could assert would serve as bricks and mortar. I thought of possible allies like Mr. Harrison, a man I trusted silently for years and who understood the intricacies behind legal battles. I envisioned the moment when my plan would take shape, a moment not to punish with words, but to assert power with undeniable finality. This resolve settled deep into my bones. I gave myself a quiet oath, a solemn promise whispered into the shadows of the still house. No forgiveness. No compromise. Only the steel justice of truth, administered through patience. This was my liberation, the rebirth of a woman who would no longer be erased by cruelty or greed. With that silent vow for company, I sat through the night, the heaviness in my chest now tempered by a cool flame of determination. I watched as darkness faded slowly into dawn, knowing that with the sun's rise, my journey to reclaim my life and dignity, to redefine my family's legacy would begin. It was not a plan born of impulsive fury, but of measured strategy and quiet power. All the years of pain and disappointment had distilled into that single moment of peaceful resolution. Silence would be my weapon, and in that silence, I would find justice. The next morning arrived quietly, the light gentle as it filtered through the curtains of my room, casting a soft glow on the familiar surroundings of the house that had carried so many years of my life. I felt a sense of calm determination settle within me, an unseen fire burning steady and resolute. Today marked the beginning of a carefully plotted journey. I dressed with care, choosing garments that reflected a quiet dignity, not demanding attention, but embodying the strength I had found in the solitude of night. I reached for the phone and dialed Mr. Harrison's number. His voice came swiftly, calm and assuring, a steady anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Over the years, he had become my trusted confidant in matters of law and finance, a silent partner in the stewardship of my affairs. Today, however, our relationship was about to change. This time, he would not only advise, but stand with me as I reclaimed control. "I need to meet you," I said, my voice firm but composed. "It's urgent." By late morning, I sat in his office, a room that smelled of leather, books, and a faint trace of old ink, with a folder resting on the polished desk before me. It contained the documents outlining my will, assets, and legal holdings, all carefully maintained over the years. This was the battlefield where I would wage my quiet war. "I want the will rewritten," I stated plainly, meeting his gaze steadily. "Mark, Lisa, Vanessa, they must be removed as beneficiaries. The inheritance will be redirected according to my wishes. Everything is under my name and control." Mr. Harrison regarded me with a mixture of respect and caution. "You've thought this through." "Yes," I replied, "this is not about spite. It is about reclaiming justice. They have shown their true colors. I will no longer be a passive victim." Together, we delved into the intricate web of financial records, contracts, and legal documents. Over the years, I had learned to navigate these papers, becoming intimately familiar with the small print that often goes unnoticed. What had once been simply the management of household accounts and investments was now my arsenal. Each document was a key, a lock, a weapon. The house, the savings, the investments, including rental properties purchased through modest savings, were all assets I meticulously reviewed. I studied the ownership structures, verified signatures, and explored every clause capable of securing my hold. This was slow work, demanding precision. One miscalculation here, one overlooked provision there, and my entire plan could unravel. But patience was my creed. Where others rushed, I lingered and studied. I read legal statutes and wills with the care of a scholar, turning over every stone the law offered for protection and control. Night after night, I sat with the soft glow of a lamp, my eyes scanning ledgers and contracts. The house around me held memories and ghosts, but now it also bore witness to my silent mission. My children, unaware of the storm gathering, went about their lives with a confidence born of entitlement. Mark and Lisa paraded their presumed victory, laughing and scheming as if the inheritance were an inevitability. Vanessa's forced cheerfulness concealed something sharper, a watchful eye that failed to see the depth of my resolve. As days blurred into weeks, the plan took form. Mr. Harrison and I drafted new wills, property deeds were reviewed and updated, trust funds reassigned. Each legal maneuver tightened the web, stripping entitlement from their grasp and vesting control solely in me. The house, once a shared symbol of family and security, now stood as the keystone of this quiet rebellion. Some nights, fatigue threatened to steal my strength. The house seemed colder then, shadows lengthening and memories whispering like ghosts from the past. But I clung to my vision, to the thought that this was not a vendetta, but a reclaiming of dignity. The pain of years had distilled into a clear purpose. My silence, they believed, was weakness. It was anything but. Each step forward was deliberate, measured, not for spectacle, but for certainty. I rehearsed future confrontations silently, imagining the disbelief that would ripple across their faces when the truth emerged. Mark's smug assurance, Lisa's cutting glare, Vanessa's rehearsed indifference. They would all be toppled not by fury, but by the undeniable facts I would present. My voice would be calm, my resolve unshaken. Beneath the calm surface, I watched the edges of my life shift. The worn rug in the sitting room seemed less a relic of past times and more a foundation for the future I was building. Every signature I gathered, every clause rewritten, every account redirected became a brick in the fortress I was constructing, not of walls, but of law and quiet power. The transformation within me was as profound as the changes on paper. The woman who had endured betrayal was no longer bowed by sorrow. She stood upright, anchored by years of unspoken strength. The silent resolve that filled those long nights translated into a growing confidence that I would not be undone by cruelty or greed. While they continued to mock and minimize me behind my back, underestimating the quiet old woman they thought I had become, I was their equal in wit, patience, and determination. I had spent my life mastering the art of observation, patiently waiting for moments when silence held more weight than words. Now, that skill gave me power beyond what they could grasp. In that season of subtle but relentless preparation, I realized that I had transformed not only my legal standing, but also my own narrative. The story I had once told myself, the story of a mother betrayed, was no longer the whole truth. There was another story now, that of a woman asserting control, reclaiming justice, and rising rising from the shadows of hurt to stand tall in her own right. The day would come when these careful plans would culminate in a reckoning, when I would convene those gathered around me and quietly reveal the fate their entitlement did not foresee. They would learn that inheritance is not an unearned gift, but a trust bestowed only to those who honor it, and that their laughter had never been enough to break the quiet strength of a mother's will. Until then, silence was my weapon and patience my shield. Against the backdrop of a house filled with memories and secrets, a new chapter was unfolding, one defined not by bitterness or loud accusation, but by the quiet power of meticulous justice and unwavering resolve. The reckoning was near, and when it came, it would be absolute. The morning they left town for their weekend gathering, the house seemed to hold its breath, caught in a stillness that felt heavier than usual, as if anticipating the shift about to unfold within its walls. Mark, Lisa, and Vanessa moved through their preparations with practiced casualness, their voices light but laced with an arrogance born of certainty. They believed themselves the rightful heirs of everything I had built, the house, the savings, the memories contained within those walls. Their laughter, once a distant echo of family life, now filled the rooms with a hollow boastfulness that masked deeper greed and disregard. Watching them, part of me almost envied that arrogant confidence. The comfort of pretending power was assured and unassailable. But envy was fleeting, easily replaced by the steady calm of purpose that had settled inside me like a slow-burning flame. With Mr. Harrison quietly joining me, the time had come to act. The documents lay before us, meticulously prepared, every line and clause bearing the weight of years of care and the cold finality of legal authority. Among them was the new deed transferring ownership of the house, a property they had once considered theirs by right but had never respected. I had sold it discreetly to a buyer who valued it for what it was rather than what they thought it should be. Accompanying the deed was the rewritten will, reallocating the inheritance away from Mark, Lisa, and Vanessa to those unknown to them, but who reflected the respect and love I felt they had long forfeited. The financial accounts, once open to their presumed control, were now locked behind trusts, inaccessible to their grasp, every move legally ironclad. The sale of the house was swift and seamless, carried out with the quiet precision of a carefully executed plan. Those familiar walls that had echoed with the rah-rah of sibling rivalries, the whispered promises and angry mutters, and even the tender memories of childhood joys, would now belong, not to them, but to an anonymity that protected both my interests and my dignity. The house was no longer a burden, but a monument to a woman's reclaimed autonomy. Packing my belongings was a bittersweet act, each item a touchstone to a life lived, some cherished, some painful. I moved carefully through the emptying rooms, gathering relics that anchored me to the past. A quilt my mother had cast together with patient hands, a delicate vase, a keepsake from my late husband, worn photo albums that held laughter frozen in time. These objects were imbued with meaning far richer than any inheritance claim. As I relinquished the furniture and decor that my children had mocked or ignored, I felt a profound release. A shedding not only of material things, but of the burden of unmet expectations and long-held neglect. The evening deepened, wrapping the house in shadows, the silence a presence thicker than ever before. Sitting alone amid these echoes, I felt the sting of absence, the weight of solitude settling with a strange comfort. The ache of loss intertwined with the emerging pulse of freedom, a life no longer tethered to their greed and disregard. I was finally free to live not by their dictates, but by my own enduring will. This solitude was not the hollow emptiness it had once threatened to become. It was a deliberate sanctuary, chosen after years of listening to the cacophony of betrayal and disappointment. Here, in the deep quiet, I nurtured my strength, fanning the embers of resolve into a steady flame that warmed even the coldest memories. Victory, I realized, would not arise from shouting or explosive confrontations. It would come softly, layered in the folds of unseen legal maneuvers and in the serene absence of my children's presence. My power had been quiet, patient, but utterly unyielding. The past lingered like a shadow. Faces of Mark and Lisa as children, their innocent laughter, their moments of tenderness before ambition and entitlement clouded all, surfaced during the quiet nights. These recollections tugged at my heart, but did not chain me anymore. Instead, they reminded me of the journey from wounded mother to resolute woman. In the quiet, I found myself speaking to the ghosts of the past and rehearsing the words of future reckonings, words I would deliver calmly with the certainty of truth and dignity. When these truths came to light, their faces, the smug assurance of Mark, the icy stare of Lisa, Vanessa's brittle pretense, would twist in disbelief and stunned silence. They would see that their claims had unraveled, undone by a mother's quiet justice. Throughout this time, Mr. Harrison remained a steady, guiding presence. More than a lawyer, he was the custodian of justice's quiet power. With his help, legal instruments became my armor and sword, wielded not for vengeance, but for rightful reclamation. The house itself stood as a symbol of my transformation. No longer a battleground, it bore witness to the passage from subjugation to liberation. Each creak and whisper of wind through cracked windows seemed to echo the new narrative I had written, not of family fractured by greed, but of peace forged through resilience. The absence of my children was an echo of the necessary distance that preserved my self-respect. They had chosen entitlement and scorn. I had chosen strategy and silence, a combination far stronger than their ignorance allowed. My liberation was not born of wrath, but of resolved freedom. This was meticulous justice, a quiet yet powerful force that restored my dignity while preserving the integrity of my soul. The past would forever be a part of me, etched in memory, but it no longer held dominion over my spirit. Releasing the house was itself liberation. It was more than bricks and mortar, more than property lost or gained. It was the surrender of a symbol that had come to represent fractured loyalty and pain. Yet in letting it go, I opened the way for a new life, a life I could shape with unburdened hands and heart. Within the quiet home, in the sanctuary of solitude, I found strength born of patience and hard-won resolve. The scars of betrayal remained, but they told a story of survival and a testament to enduring spirit. Silence had been my weapon, and it had cut deeper than any roar. Sitting there, embraced by the stillness of a home no longer mine, I was filled with a profound sense of peace and victory. The weight of past wounds lightened, replaced by the unshakable conviction that my life would be governed by my choices alone. I was unbroken, unbent, quietly triumphant. This was no ending, but a brand new beginning, a reaffirmation of the quiet power grown through decades of sacrifice, patience, and unwavering strength. I had reclaimed my story, my dignity, and most importantly, myself. When Mark and Lisa finally returned from their weekend gathering, the atmosphere they brought with them was filled with the familiar arrogance and entitlement that had marked their presence for years. Their laughter moved through the rooms like an unwelcome echo, laced with bravado and certainty, as if the inheritance and the control of the house were guaranteed simply by their lineage. Vanessa accompanied them, her polished smile barely concealing the tension beneath, a mask worn to steady herself against the growing undercurrents neither she nor they fully understood. They walked through the house with unearned confidence, touching surfaces, imagining futures still theirs to claim. But I was no longer the woman they had dismissed, that quiet, frail figure they believed powerless. I had transformed, as had my resolve. The patience that had shaped my silent war now revealed itself fully in this defining moment. With Mr. Harrison by my side, silent and steadfast, we gathered in the living room. That room, once filled with the laughter and arguments of a deteriorating family, was about to witness a different kind of authority. The calm assertion of a mother's will, declared not in anger, but in unassailable truth. Mr. Harrison by my side, silent and steadfast, we gathered in the living room. That room, once filled with the laughter and arguments of a deteriorating family, was about to witness a different kind of authority. The calm assertion of a mother's will, declared not in anger, but in unassailable truth. Mr. Harrison stood and cleared his throat, his voice steady as he announced that the reading of the new will was about to commence. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Expectant smiles faded into taut lines and furrowed brows. Mark's eyes flickered with shock as he realized what he was about to hear. Lisa's glare sharpened, searching for any hint that this could be undone. Vanessa's composed facade cracked just enough to reveal the edge of worry. The room grew heavy with a tense silence, pregnant with anticipation and dread. The new will spelled out without hesitation that Mark and Lisa, along with Vanessa, no longer held any claim to the inheritance. The house was no longer theirs to anticipate or manipulate. It had been sold discreetly, the proceeds safely secured beyond their reach. Financial accounts they once believed were theirs to command had been irrevocably altered, with assets redirected into trusts and funds that removed their access entirely. The power they assumed was theirs by right had vanished under the weight of legal certainty. Mark's lips parted as if to argue, to demand something, anything, but the words caught and died on his tongue. Lisa's eyes raged, bearing the weight of betrayal, yet no sound emerged to challenge the authority of the moment. Vanessa's practiced smile faltered, beginning to dissolve in the face of undeniable fact. The stunned realization of their loss crystallized in the room, an invisible but crushing presence. I did not raise my voice. I only spoke once, quietly but with absolute conviction. Your laughter did not break me. It awakened me. Those words caused the room to hold its breath. Not a threat nor a plea, but the simple truth of a woman who had endured long enough to emerge stronger. Their cruelty, their derision, once weapons intended to break me, had instead forged my resolve. That laughter, biting and cold, was the spark that kindled my silent fight for justice. This was the culmination of years of restraint and calculated action. I was no longer the victim of their entitlement, but the architect of my own justice. The slow, deliberate moves that had redefined the landscape of our fractured family were irreversible. I held no desire for vengeance. What I sought was only the restoration of dignity and the protection of what was rightfully mine. The tension thickened, but I remained calm, meeting their eyes with unwavering steadiness. This was not the time for angry words or fiery confrontations. It was the time for quiet, undeniable truth to reign. The bonds of entitlement that had once held my children in control were broken by patience and by law. When the reading concluded and the weight of their loss fully settled upon them, Mark, Lisa, and Vanessa rose in silence. The air was thick with unspoken anger and humiliation, but there was no further need for words. Their departure was heavy and solemn, a symbolic severing of ties they had foolishly assumed unbreakable. In the ensuing quiet, the house itself seemed to pulse with a new kind of energy. No longer a battlefield scarred by conflict, but a sanctuary defined by peace and reclamation. Its walls, which had absorbed years of laughter and pain, now bore the quiet witness to a mother who had won a battle fought not with force or fury, but with wisdom and unwavering resolve. Sitting alone amidst the stillness, I felt the enormity of what had just transpired. I was no longer a woman diminished by disdain or betrayal. I was whole, I was strong, I was finally free. I understood then that silence and patience are far more powerful tools than noise and anger. That justice, executed with precision and calm, achieves a far deeper victory than any shout or spectacle. The decades of hurt and neglect had distilled into a triumph that was both quiet and absolute. By reclaiming my legacy, I reclaimed myself. The house was sold, my plans were in place, the will was irrevocably rewritten. Each of these acts was a thread woven together to form a tapestry of liberty and self-respect. The book of our family story had turned a new page. In their stunned silence, I heard the resounding echo of that truth. Entitlement does not equal inheritance. Respect and love do not come with birthright alone. True strength belongs to those who endure, observe, and act with steady purpose. I had been betrayed, but I was no longer broken. I was the master of my destiny, the guardian of my integrity, and the author of my own legacy. And in that knowledge, I found a peace so profound that no reconciliation or spoken apology could ever grant. Their laughter, once a source of humiliation and pain, had become the catalyst for my most powerful, most serene victory. After their departure, the house settled into a quiet I had never before experienced. It was not the uneasy silence that follows conflict or the heavy stillness of absence, but a gentle, assured calm, a sanctuary breathing with newfound peace. The walls, steeped in decades of memories, seemed to exhale, releasing the weight of old pain and betrayal that they had long carried. This home, once a stage for fracture and injustice, now stood as a quiet witness to a different kind of victory, a mother's triumph, not one with anger or force, but with wisdom, patience, and unyielding resolve. I sat alone amidst the stillness, the enormity of the moment sinking into my bones. No longer was I diminished by disdain, cast aside by those I had nurtured. Instead, I felt whole, strong, and finally free. Years of silent suffering and careful strategy had brought me to this place, not of isolation, but of profound self-possession. In the afterglow of this reckoning, I understood that silence and patience are far more powerful allies than noise or fury. Justice, when pursued with precision and calm determination, carries a depth and permanence that no shouted accusation can outmatch. The hurt and neglect I had endured, once crushing, had distilled through time into a victory that was both quiet and absolute, a testament to resilience that needed no fanfare. By reclaiming my legacy, I had reclaimed myself. The house was sold, the will irrevocably rewritten, and my plans securely in place. Each of these acts was a stitch woven into a tapestry of liberty and self-respect that I had painstakingly crafted. The power I now held was not just legal ownership, but the freedom to shape my own life, free from their shadows. The narrative of our family had shifted irrevocably. In the silence that followed their stunned disbelief, I heard a truth both simple and profound. Entitlement does not ensure inheritance. Love and respect are not guaranteed by blood alone. They must be earned through honor, kindness, and integrity. True strength belongs to those who endure hardships, who watch and understand, and who step forward with steady purpose when the time arises. Though the wounds of betrayal lingered, I no longer carried their pain as a burden. I was not broken, but reborn, a master of my destiny, the guardian of my integrity, and the author of a legacy written by my own hand. My victory was not born of vengeance, but born of quiet courage and steadfast patience. In moments of stillness, I whispered into the corners of the house. Silence was my only weapon. Those words anchored me, reminding me that strength often wears the guise of restraint, that the deepest justice is sometimes the one that lingers, unseen, until it inevitably changes everything. This was not an ending, but a new beginning, a dawn forged through decades of sacrifice, resilience, and unwavering spirit. It was an affirmation that life can rise anew from the ashes of betrayal, and that peace is possible even after the darkest storms. I had reclaimed more than possessions. I had reclaimed my story, my dignity, and most importantly, myself. And in that reclamation, I found a peace so profound and complete that no apology or forgiveness could have granted. Their laughter, once the source of my humiliation and sorrow, had become the catalyst for my most powerful and serene victory. A quiet triumph born in the stillness of patience and the strength of enduring love.